Carl Jung cautioned us once about a presence we won't confront, an energy so deep, so impenetrable that many of us turn away. We speak of it in hushed tones. We think of it as far away, inaccessible, unattainable. But it is not out there. It resides deep within the maze of your own mind, quietly watching, challenging you to face it. To disregard it is to disregard a part of yourself calling out for attention, for forgiveness. There is within each of us a presence, a subtle but certain thing, a power that does not speak in common words but speaks in the voice of symbols, of dreams, of intuitions. It is not something remote, beyond the stars or hidden away in holy books. No, it is a living piece of ourselves, quietly watching, waiting, sometimes nudging us toward awareness. Many go through life as if this inner presence doesn't exist, too busy being pulled by the demands of the world about them, yet there it is waiting like a shadow that grows more prominent the longer it is disregarded. It is not a figment of morality, nor a God imposed from outside. It is the reflection of the entirety of our nature, a mirror waiting to show us both what is noble and what is concealed. We are afraid to turn towards it, because by so doing, we are forced to face the truths we have avoided, the unexamined desires, the hidden terrors, the desires that make us feel ugly. They all belong in this interior space. To encounter this presence is to meet ourselves in our most naked state, free of the illusions we create in order to feel safe or acceptable. And yet the very evading of it is what causes pain. We crave solace in certainty, in routine, in the roles the world has conditioned us to play, but these are merely anesthetics for a mind and soul yearning to open. The inner presence does not ask to be punished. It just waits insistently and patiently to be acknowledged by dreams, by times of deep intuition, or even by the still feeling of discomfort. It speaks to us. It is the aspect of the psyche that understands we are not whole without it. It contains within it the possibility for wholeness, a wholeness that no outside success or love affair can bring. And yet so many turn aside, fearing the depths of their own awareness. They believe that they can get by without it, that to keep the habits of everyday life, to feed the superficial wants, and to dissemble the deep questions that arise uninvited at night is sufficient. But life has a way of imposing these facts upon us until we cannot help but see that they exist. To recognize this force within is not a function of intellect, but of courage, patience, and a willingness to confront oneself. It requires a plunge into the unseen deeps, a meeting of both the light and the darkness within. To behold it is to behold the completeness of one's own soul, and to accept it is to open a road toward change. The instant that we recognize this inner presence, we enter a new world of knowledge, a world in which life's mysteries begin to reveal themselves, not as problems to be solved, but as realities to be absorbed. The presence is not a concept. It is alive, dynamic, and patiently waiting for the day that we finally look in its direction. There is a part of us we will not acknowledge, a presence that mutters softly at the back of our minds, urging us toward awareness. And yet again and again we turn away. We surround ourselves with distractions, with clamor, with boundless duty, as if filling our lives with activity would serve to keep us from the insistent quiet of this internal power. It is insidious at first, this prodding, this insistence on notice. It is a whisper and not a cry, a persistent reminder that something basic in us is being overlooked. And so, in fear, or maybe in complacency about the familiar, we avoid it. We say to ourselves there is always another day, that the burden of our own existence can wait, that distraction is a sanctuary. But this avoidance is not harmless. To flee from what resides within is to weaken the very core of our being. The psyche, unlike the body, does not heal through evasion. The parts of ourselves that we deny do not vanish, they ferment. They grow in darkness, quietly shaping our thoughts, our impulses, our decisions in ways we scarcely understand. The more we keep looking away, the greater the power that those ignored pieces gain. Our fears, our open wounds of grief, our bitterness, even our unconscious desires, they all become secret architects of our lives. We pretend to be free, but we are secretly bound by what we have avoided seeing. It is not just the existence of fear or shadow that calls for acknowledgement. It is the spark of divinity for wholeness itself. In each and every human exists the potential for wholeness, a power that calls us towards harmony and genuineness. When we turn away, we repress not only our shadow, but the chance to meet this deep presence. In turning away, we exchange aliveness for the facade of security. The life that is ours to have is thwarted by our own unwillingness to confront the unknown in ourselves. We often justify this reluctance. We say that life is too stressful, that our priorities must be accommodated, that tackling what is inside is a luxury and activity for another day. But these excuses are themselves forms of the evasion. There is never a time when the call of the world and the call of the soul are not in competition with each other. The question is whether or not we allow ourselves to be guided by what is outside and ephemeral, or if we have the courage to go within, to confront the pain that is the threshold to real knowledge. What we run from is not a foe eager to annihilate us, but a mirror showing us our incompleteness, a power calling us to behold ourselves truthfully. Deny it, and we leave our growth incomplete, our potential untapped. It is avoidance that magnifies suffering. Reflect on how many of our deepest fears come not from what happens outside, but from the inner conflicts we will not admit. The chaos, the vacancy, the repeated patterns in our lives, these are the shadows of avoidance. They linger, nagging at our consciousness, because we have not had the courage to listen to the truths they embody. It takes courage to stop, to step away from the distractions, and to let the psyche speak. In silence, we can start to see the gentle cues of what has been suppressed, a glimmer of guilt here, a chronic anger there, a restlessness that cannot be accounted for. These are all signposts that point to that which yearns to be seen. To answer them is to do justice to the wholeness that lies beneath our surface, to recognize that life is not so much a chronicle of external achievement, but an inward journey into the very furthest reaches of our own selves. Avoidance therefore is self-betrayal. It is consent to illusion, capitulation to the delusion that we can live in wholeness without accepting what is most fundamental within us. And yet, in a seeming contradiction, the very things we run away from are the keys to freedom. In facing them, in bringing them into awareness, we take back the power that fear has taken away. We realize that what we were afraid of was not our demise, but our awakening. The shadow, having been confronted, becomes a strength. The aspects of ourselves that felt foreign or menacing become essential elements of our uniqueness as doorways to imagination, to knowing, to wholeness. There is no bypass, there is no going around. The more relentless the avoidance, the greater the burden, not in some ethereal or unreal way, but in the flesh and blood quality of our lives. The quiet frustration, the agitation, the feeling of incompleteness that no achievement, no diversion can ever satisfy. But once we move towards what we have evaded, we start to engage in the alchemy of change. What we feared now becomes comprehensible. What was once repressed becomes empowered. What was once evaded becomes the very source of our aliveness. Therefore, the pressing truth is this: evasiveness weakens us not because the inner presence is merciless or punitive, but because evasiveness itself destroys the flow of life. To evade what is within is to submit a part of one to stagnation and limitation. To meet it is to open a door to wholeness, to stir dormant energies, to take possession of a life that is ours. There is a quiet but unmistakable urgency in this message, for time waits for no one and the unclaimed self becomes heavier with each day of abandonment. The way ahead is not easy, and it is not pleasant, but it is the way of truth, of bravery, of life lived. You know, there's a part of us that we hardly ever speak of, a secret place that the majority of people shun at all costs. It is the shadow, the group of impulses, anxieties, longings, and instincts that we deny even exist within us. We bear it in silence, like a burden we do not wish to acknowledge, and yet it controls more of what we do than we care to know. To meet this shadow is not a pleasant experience. It requires honesty that erodes the very foundations of how we see ourselves. It requires that we sit with those aspects of ourselves that we have designated as unacceptable, shameful, or wrong. And by doing it, we find something remarkable. These very things we dread encountering are closely related to the deepest center of our own being, that which yearns for completeness and wholeness. We all live in denial. We pack our lives with distractions, with the clatter of work, duties, or constant trivialities, as if in so doing we can fend off the shadow. We persuade ourselves that it is sufficient to be good, to obey, to accomplish, to prosper, while the interior life holds on quiet and waiting. But the shadow is not vanquished by evasion. It festers in the shadow, shaping our decisions, our relationships, and our judgments beyond our conscious awareness. It is there in the rage we cannot account for, the jealousy we disown, the stuck patterns that infuriate us. These are not coincidences, they are signals from the depths, alerting us that aspects of ourselves remain unknown and thus not integrated. To integrate the shadow, to really meet it, takes courage beyond all else. It takes the courage to peer inward without shrinking, to confess that what we have been keeping hidden is real and that it has power. It is not about self-denunciation or self-abhorrence. It is about insight, to behold one's rage, one's greed, one's fear, and to say, yes, this is part of me, is to start the process of change. It is in this awareness that the doorway to wholeness is created. We cannot become whole by trying to be something we are not. Real growth is created through honesty, and honesty starts with the recognition of the shadow. There is a desire to fear this process, because it does call into question the comforting illusions we have constructed about ourselves. We are afraid of the darkness, the unknown inside, and we think that if we approach it, we will be flooded, engulfed, or lost. But the contrary is true. When we approach these inner unknowns, when we bring the light of awareness to them, we know their reality. We know that they are not monsters to be annihilated, but energies to be perceived and incorporated. What we dreaded as chaos or corruption becomes a source of creativeness, wisdom, and strength. The shadow is no longer an enemy, but a teacher, teaching us how to move towards authenticity and depth. This integration is not something that happens once, but a process that occurs throughout our lives. Every day brings with it new experiences to meet up with parts of ourselves that we have shunned. Every relationship, every problem, every failure has a mirror reflecting our unclaimed aspects. To ignore them is to stay fragmented, to exist merely on the surface levels of life. But to accept them, to confront them head on, is to open the door to a dialogue with the innermost truths of our psyche. It is a journey of courage, patience, and compassion, for we must speak to even our darkest urges in an understanding way instead of condemnation. There is an inner presence that awaits, the divine part of our mind, the wholeness to which all human existence gravitates. And it is through experience of the shadow that we start sensing this presence. For self and shadow are not distinct. They are part of each other, two strands of the same thread to wholeness, each act of integrity, each moment of self-awareness, each dealing with our own shadow draws us closer to that internal harmony, to the manifestation of our greatest selves. So I charge you, don't turn away from the painful realities within you. Don't suppress the pieces that frighten or confuse you. Sit with them, listen to them, know them. And in doing so, you start to incorporate, to become complete, to lead a life that is not divided by repression, but enriched by knowledge. The shadow is no cage to break out of, but a journey to wisdom, a key to the very core of your being, waiting patiently for the heart to witness it, to hold it, and to manifest it into something radiant. There is a place in us that we hardly ever admit, a place as expansive as it is intimate, as foreign as it is known. It is not a distant or ethereal thing hanging somewhere beyond ourselves. Instead, it lives on quietly, insistently deep in the wellspring of our souls. Some people pass their entire lives evading it, confusing distraction with participation, activity with meaning, outside success with inner satisfaction, and yet it waits, this presence, the God within, the wholeness archetype. It does not command, it does not chastise, but it calls insistently, softly, as a truth that cannot forever be avoided. To fulfill it is to fulfill ourselves completely, and in doing so lies the power to revolutionize every piece of our life that has long been broken up, every hurt that has long been denied, and every possibility that has long been asleep. To meet with this presence is to be awakened to a reality that is both frightening and freeing. It uncovers the aspects of ourselves we have repressed, the passions we have suppressed, the needs we have disavowed. We might feel ill prepared, even perhaps frightened, for it requires honesty, the kind of honesty that peels away deception, delusions, and soothing fictions. And yet, it is that same honesty that has the power to set us free. For only when we become aware of the totality of our existence, the light and the darkness, the noble and the base, are we able to integrate it into a unified whole. This integration is not simply psychological, it is profoundly spiritual, a reconciliation of what we see and what actually is within. Think for a moment of all the hours we invest looking for fulfillment outside of ourselves, in achievements, in adoration, in acceptance, in the fleeting diversions of life. All of this is, at best, a qualified connection to reality, and at worst, an avoidance of the deep work that exists within. The God within, the wholeness archetype, does not live in achievements or awards. It lives where we look our inner self straight in the face. It is through the silent recognition of our shadows, through the brave facing of our fears, that this presence takes life, becomes concrete and palpable. In accessing it, we are able to tap into a source of knowledge and strength unlike any other, a fountain that has been there all along, but one which has been neglected for centuries. Simply knowing it is present is not enough. We must actively connect with it. To wake up to the inner God is to let ourselves be changed by the very parts of ourselves we have been avoiding. It demands that one be willing to meet with discomfort, to confront the uncertainty that comes with knowledge of oneself, to accept the paradoxes and contradictions that are the human condition. Through it, we find that the power in us is not a passive state but an active, leading force. It guides our choices, makes sense of our intentions, and lights up paths that had hitherto been unseen. It is not bullying. It is not outside of us. It is the innermost truth of our own nature emerging, calling upon us to live in harmony with who we really are, with a richer and fuller understanding of life. As we incorporate this presence, we start seeing the world in different ways. Mundane encounters take on new meaning, challenges face us with a strength rooted, and the mundane becomes infused with significance. Our decisions are no longer driven by habit, by fear, or by outside expectation. They are directed by an intimate identification with the wholeness we have come to know in ourselves. It is not a theoretical ideal or a distant hope. It is a working, living fact, one that imbues the ordinary with the sacred, the familiar with the extraordinary. The presence we use to turn a blind eye to becomes a daily companion, a voice of wisdom, heart, and tenacity. It reminds us that the sacred is not an abstract power, but an ever-present undertow in our lives, manifest in every choice, every perception, every meeting. To connect with this inner God is, finally, to assume responsibility, not responsibility as obligation or duty conferred upon us by external authority, but responsibility as awareness and mastery of ourselves. It is to recognize that the life we lead is the life we create, that the potential we have is our potential to claim, and that the journey toward wholeness is taken one mindful step at a time. Here, we find both necessity and freedom. Freedom, since we are no longer hampered by delusion or evasion. Necessity, since the inner process has to be gone through, and no quantity of outward diversion can take its place. There is a stillness in this fact, a reminder that time is short, that the moment for self-realization is ever available but never assured. Thus, when I use this inner presence, I use more than metaphor or concept. I am speaking of the living reality that resides within, inviting us to awaken, to encounter, to embrace, and to integrate. Its power is immense, not because it dominates or controls, but because it allows us to access a part of ourselves that has always been there, hidden beneath layers of fear, avoidance, and habit. When we meet it, we are met in return. When we embrace it, we are embraced by our own deepest truth, and in that embrace lies the transformative power to live fully, consciously, and authentically. It is generally said that the journey to self-realization is a journey of discomfort and not ease, and it is true. It is impossible to enter into the richness of life without first encountering those elements of oneself which one has long denied, repressed, or feared. Within every human spirit there is depth, an inner dimension, a place of being that few are willing to venture into. It is a place that does not yield its treasures lightly, and it will demand a confrontation with truths that are often uncomfortable, even frightening. To walk this path is to embrace courage in its most profound sense. Not the physical bravery or superficial courage of dashing, but spiritual courage, the ability to confront the unknown inside, to greet the shadows of one's own soul, and bear the burden of one's own repressed drives. The human being is susceptible to distraction, to running away from that which is hard. We clothe ourselves with noise, with busyness, with continual din of the outside world, thinking that it protects us from inner struggle. But the mind cannot be stilled by diversion. The spirit is patient, demanding that we hear it. Each act of evasion makes the gap between what we are and what we might be larger. We deny ourselves the transfigurative energy latent in the acknowledgement of our deepest desires and fears. And yet, even as we turn away, the presence we will not acknowledge still holds sway, subtle, inexorable, and invisible force that governs our choices, our relationships, our fate. To confront this presence takes honesty of a sort that is uncommon and frequently resented. It is the integrity that peels away illusion, the facades we build to avoid pain. It dares us to examine our lives and see the patterns that we have continued unconsciously, the habits, the resentments, the projections that have guided our behavior without our knowing. One must be ready to observe oneself as a whole, not just the well-tended, socially acceptable half, but the repressed, sometimes turbulent inner life that is feared and kept in the dark. Doing so forces us to face the shadows within us, those urges, fears, and contradictions we would rather deny. But these shadows are not our enemies. They are part of our own psyche calling to be brought into our whole. They are the gateways to a wholeness available in no other way than through acceptance and confrontation. There is also a need for patience. One does not awaken to such truths immediately, nor does one become integrated in an instant of insight. The process is plodding, grueling, and iterative. One needs to stay with pain. One needs to notice the moves to avoid or to explain away the meaning of what is found. Every meeting with the repressed aspects of oneself, every grappling with the painful realities deepens the potential for understanding, empathy, and discernment. And as this courage is practiced, something magical begins to happen. The inner world, previously splintered and frightened, starts to organize itself. A calm authority wells up from within, a sense of direction that is wiser than intellect or reason, and more trustworthy than the ephemeral opinions of others. It is the voice of awareness, the presence that has been waiting all along, leading each step to wholeness. The courage I am talking about is not passive. It is active participation with one's own interior life. It is the conscious decision to look at what one has long avoided, to embrace the discomfort of confronting the unknown within, and to let oneself be changed by that confrontation. This bravery does not promise comfort, but it promises honesty. It promises that one lives his or her life based on the innermost realities of the psyche and not the illusions foisted by fear or habit. To forego this bravery is to live half alive. To walk through life without the brightness or the richness that is one's due. To accept it is to step into one's own self, to greet the fullness of life with eyes wide open, and to sense the divine presence that has been softly calling from within. And so the challenge confronts each of us. To reject it is to stay in the shadow of ourselves. To greet it is to awaken. The courage it takes is immense, and yet it is the only route to the integration and the knowledge that render life meaningful. One will have to be brave enough to confront, to challenge, to withstand, and to accept. There lies in this confrontation a rich payoff, a feeling of being aligned, a feeling of completeness, a joining with the deeper reality that has all the while existed, waiting for acknowledgement. This is the path that one cannot help but take if one wants to know the truth about the self. The moment to start is now. The most courageous act one can do is to encounter the self with sincerity, confront the covered up, and come out changed. Do not keep turning away from the presence that has been in inviting you, for it is not far away or remote. It is not a story from scripture or a concept confined to books. It is the living, breathing essence within you, quietly waiting for acknowledgement. Most of us spend our lives avoiding it, masking its call with endless distractions, with business, with certainty, with noise. We reassure ourselves that we are secure because we are busy, because the world needs us, because fear tells us that what is inside can be too great, too terrifying, too requiring. But the reality is, each moment we turn away is a moment that we deprive ourselves of the wholeness of our life. This interior presence is sometimes referred to as God, though it exceeds any limited definition. It is the symbol of wholeness, the unconscious center of our existence, the mirror in which our shadow and our light coincide. And the shadow, naturally, is what we do not want to see. It is the aspects of ourselves we consider unworthy, disagreeable, or shameful. It is the rage we repress, the fear we flee from, the lust we censor. To face this internal presence is to face the entirety of who we are, the light and the shadow, the high and the low. Most are afraid to do this, afraid that the darkness will overwhelm us, consume us, or shatter the delusion of control we hold on to. But in truth, avoidance of it is much more destructive, for it leaves the soul fractured, discontented, and unfulfilled. I want to challenge you now to think about the fact that avoidance is not safety. It is a gradual stripping away of the life you may have lived. Each moment of turning away from your internal God is a subtle, relentless burden. It shows itself as anxiety, discontentment, emptiness, or the feeling like something essential is lacking. The soul, when ignored, finds means to make itself heard, usually in pain, in bewilderment, in troubling dreams and haunting images. And the question becomes, will you keep running, or will you finally stand and look? Will you permit yourself to meet that which is larger than your defenses, older than your fears, that which is, in the end, the very presence of your own being? To encounter this presence takes courage, not the body's courage, but the mind's and the heart's. It takes honesty, unflinching, unflattering, and deeply freeing. It invites you to look at your motives, your desires, your failures, and your shadows without denial, without pretense, without justification. It invites you to say, I will see myself as I am, and I will welcome the part of me that I have rejected, for in that acknowledgement lies the path to wholeness. This is not a task to be rushed or treated lightly. It is the gradual, resolute turning towards truth, a turning that can be uncomfortable, even threatening, for it dispels illusions and requires responsibility for one's own existence. And yet, in this confrontation, there is release. There is strength in acknowledgement. There is liberation in acceptance. There is life in the embrace of what has been denied so long. The inner God does not punish. It does not require pain for itself. It goes instead for integration, for harmony and the coordination of the self with its highest potential. To engage it is to find within the dormant abilities, the sense of direction, the richness of perception, the vitality to act effectively in the world. To fulfill it is to become awake, to become whole, to transition from dismembered life to one that is full of meaning. Don't wait another minute, for there is no ideal moment to face what you have been hesitant to face. There is only now, the now in which you can turn, the now in which you can behold yourself, the now in which you can accept what has been suppressed. It is a vocation that cannot be delayed, for the longer it is put off, the more the self will be incomplete. It is not sufficient to read, to think, or to dream about it. Something must be done. A willingness to sit in the silence, to confront the painful realities, to venture into the unseen places of your own mind, to pay attention to the whispered call of what has been repressed. In this act, you claim responsibility for your life, for your awakening, and for the potential that has patiently waited inside of you. So I invite you, step forward. Do not turn away. Do not let fear, doubt, or habit rule your life anymore. Look into the depths of your own being and greet the God you have avoided facing. Let it change you, lead you, shed light upon what has been obscured. In this meeting is the potential for wholeness, for fearlessness, for insight, for direction. The moment is here. The capability is in you. Stand up to that which you have shunned, welcome that which you have rejected, and arise to the life that has been present all along.